Welcome to the Easier Way to Sell presentation of Close the Deal Without Selling. Here is your host and developer of the Easier Way to Sell, Krieger.
This is Krieger. Welcome back. I think you'll enjoy this episode. I know I enjoyed this episode as I was putting it together because I got to talk about a movie. And that movie is Glengarry Glen Ross, and two of the pieces that I'm going to be sharing with you today contain ideas and formats presented in Glengarry Glen Ross that first I want you to take in and personalize, and as soon as you have them and you think you know them, I want you to forget them. Other than that, there is let's call it a checkup at the end of this episode to see kind of where you are in your understanding of how the system works, what are the terms that are used in the system or terminology, and kind of see where you are. If you're where you want to be in your quest to learn this system, marvelous. If not, I'm going to recommend, as I've recommended before, that you go back and you revisit episodes 1 through 10. In those episodes, you can identify where the questions originated and really learn them and how they fit into the entire system. I've told you that I have a ton of material that I've been sifting through, and a lot of it's about traditional sales training and traditional sales training techniques. And as I was going through all those years of training material, I found a motherload of information about the techniques used when the traditional way to sell is in force, and how those techniques became traditional. I gave some thought to covering all of them here on the podcast, but it occurred to me that it would be much easier to paint a word picture based on, what else, one of my favorite movies, Glengarry Glen Ross. If you're in sales and you haven't seen Glengarry Glen Ross, watch it within the next 48 hours. No excuses. It's your homework. I'm not saying it'll turn into one of your favorites, but you must watch the film if you're in sales. For those of you who haven't seen it, I'd like you to pretend for a moment that you are magically dropped into a sales team that makes up the cast of this movie. You now sell the way all the members of that team are asked to sell and prospect. As a part of this sales team, you were taught and understand fully the traditional way to sell. You're savvy enough to recognize the personal benefits and the drawbacks of having to sell this way. In a memorable, if not the most memorable moment in the film, a young Alec Baldwin appears as a pompous sales consultant who's been asked by management to read the riot act to the Glengarry Glen Ross sales team. When you watch the film, pay special attention to Baldwin's explanation of the traditional blueprint for selling known as A.I.D.A. And those initials stand for attention, interest, desire, and action. And what it really means is whether or not your prospect is in your market, it's your job to get their attention focused on your product. And secondly, you have to raise their interest level by using your sales pitch and your convincing skills to get them to that next level. If they don't have an interest, you create it. Your pitch will build desire. Well, that's what it's supposed to do according to the A.I.D.A. model. By now, you're aware that the feeling of desire or any emotion like desire usually stems from a need to resolve a difference between your present state and your desired state. In other words, desire exists when there's some sort of problem for which you'd like an immediate solution. That's desire. And finally, after you've done all your selling, after you got their attention, after you created an interest, after you've enhanced their desire, it's time for the final A. It's time for action. It's time to go in for the score. It's time to close the deal. According to the A.I.D.A instruction model laid out in the movie, you must now employ your most effective closing lines. Here's an example. You can see why it's a good idea to take action on this right away, can't you? Here's another one called the reduction to the ridiculous. Well, when you look at the price, it really comes down to about $2 a day, and that would fit in your budget, wouldn't it? Yes? Well, good. Sign here. There are dozens of these types of closes, and you may know more than a few yourself. But you're probably aware by now that I'm going to ask you to get rid of all of them. Watch the movie. Make a pledge that you'll avoid learning how to sell that way, or you'll never sell that way again. Imagine how much different the lives of that sales team would have been if they were able to use the easier way to sell. You know what I mean? I want to give a shout out to all of our first-time listeners. I think you'll find this podcast most enjoyable just based on my assumption that since you're listening to a podcast called Close the Deal Without Selling, that in some way you're involved in the world of selling. And with that in mind, I believe you were probably trained to control the sales process, whichever process that was, through some type of blueprint approach like the traditional A.I.D.A model for selling that was made famous in the movie Glengarry Glen Ross. That blueprint, the A.I.D.A blueprint, gives you the green light to dominate a communication. Avoid the notion that your sales presentation allows you to dominate or even control the communication. If you do ask questions, they're probably the tie-down type, which are designed to get your prospect into the yes set. You know, where you ask a question and they go, yes, but you're still dominating the process because you're usually the one doing the talking. Your audience of one or more people is most likely trying to tear apart your presentation because they don't like to be sold to. They're judging your presentation, and you know this is true because that's what you do when you're on the other side of a sales presentation. You look for reasons to disqualify this one-size-fits-all idea of a product or service that fits your needs. You listen to all of these presentations. You listen to commercials. You listen to everything through a filter of, yes, but. And so does everyone else. When you say it, it's selling. When they say it, it's true. If your presentation was as great as you wished it to be, or you were as good at giving it as you hoped you could be, how many more sales would be reflected in your numbers? You wouldn't be alone if you believed a steady stream of information, features, and benefits sooner or later will seduce your prospect to buy. However, this is basically a one-sided sales approach of you talking, asking a few closed-ended questions, then your prospect will answer in the yes set with yes, and then you talk again. And if you don't think salespeople are trained to talk rather than to listen, check out this little story that happened to me not that long ago. I recently received a call from someone representing my bank, and he was obviously reading from a script. He told me that one of my accounts qualified me for the opportunity to apply for some fancy executive credit card, and I said, and? He continued reciting his script in a way that reeked of him attempting to read the words in front of him. As an FYI, one of the classes I taught at Ohio State was called the Oral Interpretation of Literature, and I referred to that class as reading out loud. This young man had probably never attended such a class, but guess what? I'm a student of sales pitches, so I listened. Back to the phone call. He asked me one or two closed-end, tie-down type questions along the line of, "Wouldn't a privilege credit card come in handy, Mr. Krieger?" I responded, "I have 2 accounts with the bank. Which account qualified me? Which account?" And I probably sounded just that grumpy. After a brief pause, he replied, "Look, I really don't know anything about your accounts. I'm just reading a script." Except for my question for which he didn't have an answer, I said maybe 6 words. The bank was playing the numbers game and I was just a number. No problem. I was through. I told him I would like to end the conversation and he said almost thankfully, "Okay, goodbye." The question becomes, what could this person have done differently to control me or any other prospect? And the answer is nothing. The reason the answer is nothing is you can't control a prospect. You need to get rid of your belief that you can cause someone to say yes. If you could cause someone to say yes, everyone would say yes to you, and you know that's not the case. Your most important job as an effective communicator is control the process. You discovered that you can accomplish this control by asking a series of pertinent open-ended questions and listening carefully to the answers. Listen to the answers. Really listen. You'll harvest all the information you need to decide whether or not the prospect is someone you wish to spend your valuable time assisting. This is in no way suggesting that the individual is not of any importance, but why give a presentation without qualification? Or even worse, why risk coming off like a pushy salesman to a person who is not located directly in the yes zone area of your bell curve? However, when a prospect doesn't respond to your pitch, you've undoubtedly been tutored to provide more information and education, because that's what was missing in the communication, more talking. So you give all this information to your prospect, and the prospect still rejects your offering. That's had to have happened to you along the road of your sales life. Maybe just along the road of life. You've been rejected for something about which you cared greatly. It may have been a rejection after trying to sell yourself at a job interview. The rejection may have happened when you tried to sell yourself as a worthwhile date. Rejection has certainly happened when you're selling professionally, and I can feel your despair. I can sense that loss of control. And if you're human, you don't like to feel out of control. It's an uncomfortable and unsettling experience that most of us would rather avoid. So, just take my word for it, avoid those feelings with the easier way to sell. All I can tell you is that this system really works. It's been around for nearly 30 years, and it really works. I know, when I say it, it's selling. When you say it, it's true. So, learn this system and use it to increase your business by 20 to 50%, and then come back on and let everybody else know it's true. Okay, it's time for another review to see where you are in your own personal learning curve. What have you been holding on to in your brain? What are you remembering about the system? So, you may want to think of this as a checkup from the neck up. For you to be a more effective communicator and a more effective salesperson, these are the type of questions for which you must have answers. I'm going to go over them with you. I'll give you the question, and then I'll put in the answer, but I'll pause so you can put in yours. Remember, this isn't a test. It's more of a checkup. What is your most powerful sales tool? Questions. What is your most valuable product? Information. What events in your life should you attempt to control? Those events that are controllable. Most salespeople wing it because most salespeople do not have a system. Our selling system is called the YES formula. The YES formula contains 5 ingredients. Number 1, MBA, and that stands for Mutually Beneficial Agreements. 2, R&R, Rapport and Relationship. 3, CAN, C-A-N, and that stands for Curious, Authentic, and Neutral. Number 4 is OEQ, and that stands for Open-Ended Questions. And number 5 is QUIC. And QUIC is made up of a Q, and that stands for Qualify. U stands for Uncover the Problem. I stands for Investment. Is there money to solve the problem? C stands for Capability. Can the person make the decision to spend the money to solve the problem? K stands for Knowledge. This reminds you to keep asking questions so the client understands that you understand that they understand they have a problem. What's a problem? A problem is something that exists when there's a difference between what you have and what you say you want. More elegantly stated, a problem exists when there's a difference between your present state and your desired state. What is business? Business is your ability to solve other people's problems and get compensated for it. What is closing? Closing is your ability to get your prospect to decide on their own that your product or service or idea will solve their problem. In most cases, whose problem is a salesperson trying to solve? Their own. Now, when we go out to sell, when we go out to communicate, each of us performs consistent with our beliefs. What is a belief? A belief is that which we think to be true. And as you've heard me say now many times, just because you believe something is true doesn't make it true. It just makes it true for you. Your beliefs give you an excuse to stay in your comfort zone. What is a reframe? A reframe is a different way to look at things. What's our reframe for failure? We don't fail. We achieve results. The results may be different than the ones we had planned, but we always achieve a result. You must always learn from your results. If what you're doing isn't getting you the results you'd planned, you need to do something else. If you think about mistakes and failures, you will repeat them. You must think like a doctor. Doctors ask questions that are designed to diagnose. Doctors remain curious, apart from the problem, and neutral. The type of questions doctors ask are probing, clarifying, and most of all, diagnostic. Questions that are probing and clarifying allow you to control the structure of the communication, while allowing your prospect to control the content. As you heard me say earlier, The one doing the talking is usually perceived as the one who controls the communication. But just the opposite is true. The one who asks questions and listens controls the communication. The one doing the talking dominates it. What is the only agenda or format you should bring into a sales meeting? The yes formula. So, how'd you do? Did you know most of the answers? I invite you to go back to the earlier episodes and find out where these examples and these topics first came up. Review, review, review. Go over episodes 1 through 10 at least. I'm talking about a couple of hours. Actually, probably about the length of a Quentin Tarantino movie. And please keep in mind that just because this is called the easier way to sell, that does not mean it's the easiest thing to learn. You have to work on it. You have to maintain your commitment and your focus, because once you learn this system, your life will never be the same again, I promise. Not only will you be more effective in business and in sales, but your ability to communicate with others in a way that will make your life even better than it is now is almost hard to describe. You're just going to have to take my word for it, and as you know, up until now, I've done my best to be my word. Now, give your word that you're going to learn this, and then be your word. Well, that's enough for this episode. I hope you get just how delighted I am to share this information with you. It means a lot to me, and I hope that it means a lot to you. This is Krieger. See you next time.